lecturer at the Chemistry Department of De La Salle University, Manila. A licensed chemist, he has several publications in local and international scientific journals on the chemistry of old building materials. He also holds a master's degree in chemistry and currently completing his PhD in chemistry at the University of Philippines, Diliman. Among his other research interests include the use of chemistry techniques in analyzing the composition of heritage materials from historical churches and fortifications. Let us all welcome Mr. John Michael C. Kaime.
Hello, good afternoon to everyone. So we'll just wait for the PowerPoint to upload in a while. But you might be wondering what would a chemist be doing in this kind of an event? So actually, science and arts has something to do, it is very much related with each other. So what I will be talking right now would be how would you apply the concepts of chemistry or science in general on conservation on the arts. Okay, so good afternoon once again. So I have here my presentation. So I'll be talking about uh, chemophilately, the chemical composition of old Philippine postage stamps. So I'm a faculty member here at the chemistry department of the De La Salle University, and actually my field of expertise is into what we call chemistry of cultural heritage. So, as you all know, what happened a few years ago, if you recall what happened to the Bohol, we had this Bohol earthquake, that was in 2013, right? And then some of the churches that was destroyed there were actually noted by the Philippine government as national cultural treasures. And we actually need more conservators right now who would really put in more accurate way of conserving our cultural heritage. So this time I'll be talking about old Philippine postage stamps. So have you heard of the term chemophilately? I'm sure you have heard of the term philately. But there was this article that I read in the 1980s. He coined the term chemophilately, which states that it's actually the application or chemistry on stamps. Okay, so it's like stamp collecting, and then you're focusing on the different chemistry aspects. So if you're going to take a look at that, so those are some of the commemorative stamps that were made under the banner of chemistry, so to speak. So I would like to extend that definition of chemophilately into actually doing the chemical composition work of your old postage stamps. So this would be the general flow of my presentation. So first, I will be talking about why do I collect postage stamps. So I do collect postage stamps. Don't ask what year, pero it was during the 90s when I started collecting postage stamps. Pero my interest in chemistry at that time is not that very high. So might as well, let's say, combine my two loves, doing postage stamp collecting and then chemistry. So I'll be talking more about that. And then at the same time, I'll be talking about the brief history of postage stamps in general, and then preservation and conservation. And then next, I'll be talking about the chemistry aspect of that one. So I don't know if you heard of those different machines already. So you have that Fourier transform FTIR, infrared spectroscopy, and the energy dispersive X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy. Don't worry, I'm not really going to go over in full detail about those instruments, pero I would be telling you what type of information that you can get out of those instruments and how you can apply it into general conservation work. And then next will be the recommendations and future directions. So first things first, why do I collect postage stamps? So like I said a while ago, I've been collecting postage stamps since the early 90s. So medyo matagal na. So I think mga high school pa yata ako, magkakalaman ng edad. Pero mga high school to about early college. So I started collecting postage stamps, and usually I would go to the Manila Central Post Office, if you're familiar with that one, sa Liwasang Bonifacio, sa Loton. Okay, and then they would actually sell first day covers. Are you familiar with the first day covers? You're familiar with that one? So anyway, just to show you some examples of those different first day covers. So I have here a certain first day cover commemorating the Philippine People Power. These are our commemorative stamps. Okay, so for the first day cover, you have something like a souvenir sheet, which is not actually a stamp, and you also have the stamp material. Okay, and then what they would do is they would put in this mark, yung parang lalagyan ng tatak to cancel it. Okay, and usually the cancellation mark is during the time when it was printed or during the time when it went out. Okay, so as an example, this is in 1986. So obviously the cancellation of this stamp is also in 1986. Okay, so I usually buy this first day covers. So another example of this first day covers. So these are actually what I'm showing you would be part of my collection all these years. So these are also examples of lighthouses in the Philippines. So this is rather new. I think I bought this in what's this 2006, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so this is another example of a first day cover issue as well. Okay, so you have a stamp commemorating the different lighthouses here in the Philippines. So again, naka-postmark siya, so meaning na-cancel out na rin siya. Okay, so you actually have a lot of this first day covers, so to speak. So depending on the type of interest that you have. So why do I collect old postage stamps? So basically, parang they're like miniature pieces of artwork. Okay, so nakakatuwa dahil kasi it's very dynamic. So parang it's like having this painting and then you have this very, very small painting and then it changes from time to time. And not only that, the stamps are a lot cheaper rather than buying your full-blown painting, di ba? So depending on the amount of the stamp, usually, di ba, 3 pesos, 2 pesos, or minsan you have something like 100 pesos, 50 pesos, depending on the edition of your stamps. Pero I view them as some sort of a miniature pieces of artwork. And next, one thing that got me interested is also the historical value. So I'm actually very much interested in history as well. So probably, kung hindi ako nag-chemist, baka nag-history major siguro ako. Okay, so I don't know. Pero I'm really very much interested in history at the same time. So usually the stamps would commemorate, let's say, landmark historical happenings, depending on the country as well. And then it will also show you some geographical aspects and the many subjects depicted. So the stamps are the what do you call this? The history being depicted in the stamps are actually very varied. So pwedeng commemorative ng isang hero, isang place, animals, flowers, lahat. Depende kung anong gusto nyong i-collect. Okay? So as for me, nung medyo nag-start ako mag-collect ng stamps, parang lahat gusto kong kolektahin. Pero as you grow older pala, minsan you become more selective in terms of your collection. So currently, my interest would be more on what we call the built heritage. Kunyari, mga churches, yung mga fortifications, at saka yung mga commemorative, let's say yung mga different places in the Philippines, kunyari, 200 years ng Ilocos o yung mga 100 years ng ganito. So medyo nagiging specific na in terms of my collection, especially when you grow older. And then at the same time, it's a continuous and never-ending hobby. So year by year, month by month, you have a fresh supply of your stamps. Okay? So as long as merong happening na nangyayari, merong something that you need to commemorate in stamps. So it's actually a continuous and never-ending hobby. Okay? So now, how do we apply chemistry in cultural heritage? Actually, what I wanted to happen, or particularly my group would want to happen here in LaSalle, is we want to come up with what we call a scientific-based approach on the understanding and preservation of our tangible cultural heritage. When you say tangible, so these are the cultural heritage that you can actually hold on to, di ba? Pwede mong hawakan, di ba? So hindi katulad ng music, di ba? Yung mga music, those are intangible cultural heritage. Pero yung mga, let's say, mga buildings, paper, lahat, postage stamps, artworks, textiles, those are what we call tangible cultural heritage. So what my group and I would want to do is to come up with this scientific-based approach. So we don't just rely on what other countries has to tell us, but we have to do something on our own. And scientific yung ating basis. So siguro as an example, because part of my background is into what we call built heritage, yung mga churches, yung mga structures. If you happen to go to Bohol, well, I realize na kulang ang kaalaman natin in terms of scientific background because we always use modern day materials in order to conserve mga old structures natin, which is not good in conservation in general. So that is what I wanted to do. So come up with this scientific based approach in understanding and preserving our tangible cultural heritage. And then at the same time, if you're going to preserve something, as much as possible, you have to use the same material. So that would be, I think, medyo, medyo ganun ang aking pag-iisip eh. So if I want to preserve something, as much as possible, I would use the same material. Okay? So, well, in order for you to know kung anong laman o anong chemical composition na yon, dapat you have to perform some scientific tests. So you actually need science or you need chemistry in general for that. So that is what we wanted to do. Okay, a little bit of history about postage stamps. So postage stamps, the way we know it right now, was actually first manufactured in the 1840s. Okay, so more than 100 years ago na. And then they call it the penny black. Okay, and then it's actually the world's first adhesive stamp. So take note, prior to 1840s, usually mga letters were paid by the recipient, not the sender. Okay? So usually, kunwari ako, magsesend ako ng sulat sa inyo, kayo yung magbabayad. Hindi ako yung magbabayad. And actually, it caused a lot of problems during that time. Dahil kasi, what if the recipient doesn't want to pay up for that letter? So nagkakaroon sila ng problem, ng accumulation of letters during that time. So it's not becoming very efficient. So that's why they thought of a particular system wherein the sender would be the one paying for the letter instead of the recipient. So that's where the stamp would come in. And it's actually introduced in the 1840s. It was introduced in England, so by Sir Rowland Hill, English teacher and inventor. Okay? So take note, during that time, may mga letters na talaga. So may mga exchanges of letters even before 1840s, pero not the type na adhesive stamp. Okay? So usually they would have it signed, they would have it stamped, but not yung adhesive na stamp that we know it. Okay? So it's only in the 1840s na naging consistent yon. So that would be the world's first, so to speak, adhesive postage stamp. So I don't know kung magkano yan, pero I think it's very, very expensive right now. Okay? So a little bit of history here in the Philippines. So I have here some of the few first postage stamps that we have here in the Philippines. So it actually was printed during the reign of Queen Isabella II during the time. So 1854 to about 1868. Okay, but it took time for it to be released. So it's actually released only in the 1854 February, and then they have two types, the types 1 and types 2. So I have here the pictures of those different stamps. So take note, it's imperforate. So imperforate meaning it doesn't have any perforations. Okay, so I don't know how they would cut it during that time, di ba? Obviously. And then if you notice, this first few stamps actually came in different colors as well. So if you take a look at the lower portion, so depending on the price of the stamp, let's say for that one, that's 10 cents. I don't know what's the Spanish term for cents during that time, but 10 cents would look like a rose red and pale rose red. And then on the lower portion, you have the one parang 1 real. I don't know. I don't know the Spanish equivalent of that one, pero it's colored something like bright blue. Okay? So anyway, I think it took time. So it took time for it to be released. And I heard this, I read this certain reference. It's found at the bottom that most of the stamps were actually manufactured in Spain. Okay, so lahat ng mga stamps, mga first few stamps were all manufactured in Spain. And then at the same time, yung mga local stamps, okay, there was this time, I think 2 or 3 years after that, wherein it is manufactured locally already. Okay? Pero yun nga parang may certain issues daw doon sa sa pagma-manufacture. Sabi nila, kapag internal yung letter mo, gagamit ka daw ng locally manufactured stamp. Pero if you're going to send something international, you're going to use a stamp that came from Spain. Okay? So anyway, may mga certain issues daw yon. Pero I don't know. According to that author, sabi lang ganun, baka wala daw tiwala in terms of quality and so on. So I don't know. So anyway, ang interesting ngayon dito, well, from a chemist perspective is ano yung chemical composition ng mga dye. Okay? So remember, these are 1854s. Diba? So I would expect that the dye from that stamp would come from a plant origin, more or less. So in chemistry, we call that organic dyes. Okay? Pero you will notice as you go along, ano kaya yung changes na nangyayari doon sa mga ginagamit nun sa stamps. Ayan. So just to show you some of the stamps that I did some preliminary work on. So take note that these are just preliminary work. So preliminary works lang itong mga ginagawa ko. And for this presentation, I would like to focus only on the 1940s and the 1950s na stamp. Okay? And then these actually came from my personal collection. Okay? So, ayan, all these years, mga nakuha ko, minsan sa auntie ko, minsan sa lola ko, lahat na. so sari-sari na yan. And then, chinek ko, wow, 1940s pala to, 1950s. Uy, mukhang masaya. Ano kaya yung chemical composition? Okay? So anyway, those are not my actual photos, ha? So I got it from the Philippines stamps.net. Dahil kasi, remember, yung mga stamps in my collection are already canceled. When you say canceled, may nakastampad ng ganon. Kasi those are used stamps already. Okay, just for you to come up with this idea how the stamps would look like without the cancellation mark. Kaya I actually got it from the Philippine stamps.net. Okay, so anyway, these are just some examples of the 1940 stamps that I did some initial chemical analysis on. This would range somewhere from 1945 to about 1949. So you could see the variation in colors. So I lined them more or less depending on the colors. So if you take a look at the upper left side, those are major grayish to about brownish. And then you have something that is red to about orange, and then green. And then you have something like a blue to a violet. Okay? So later on, I'll show you some results on what I got from these stamps. And then these are also examples from my collection. Philippine postage stamps in the 1950s. So what I did is I tried separating them based on the colors first. Because I'm interested in what would be more or less the chemical composition of the dye material that they put in. Okay, so that would be more or less my focus. So anyway, you have this stamps from the 1950s, which are more or less blue to about violet color. So yon, commemorating Jose Rizal, tapos si Father Burgos, and then Ateneo. Actually, I'm supposed to get a LaSalle stamp, but the 50 years of LaSalle is 1960s plus. So I only limited it to the 1950s. Okay? So yan, and then you also have Manuel Quezon and tuberculosis, something about the tuberculosis. Okay, these are another example. So this is more or less the reddish to about orange-like color, 1950 stamp. So again, I have two versions of that Ateneo stamp, which is nice because I get to compare probably the ink material that they use. So we have a 6 cents, and then we also have a 30 cents, which is colored red. So anyway, commemorating different national heroes and centenary. So more or less medyo nagiging red siya. And then this one, green color. So if you take a look at the top, so that would be more or less the greenish something to about dark greenish color. So if you look at the top, commemorating a lot of things. I think yung dun sa pinaka left side, that was commemorating Cebu yata. That would be the coat of arms of Cebu. And then you also have the Philippine Assembly and so on. And then if you take a look at the lower part, this is rather interesting because you have this orange-like color on top of the church, which is commemorating the Manila Cathedral during that time. And mukhang striking yung yellow color na yon. So we don't know. Probably ano kaya ang chemical composition niya. So that is what's going on in my mind. And then I tried comparing it with that yellow color in the middle. I think that would be a stamp commemorating the 100 years of the first stamp that was issued in the Philippines, 1954. So tama, more or less. And then you also have the death of Ramon Magsaysay. Tama, no? That one. Okay? So tingnan natin kung ano yung mga different chemical compositions, more or less. So anyway, this is the general methodology that I employed in determining the more or less chemical composition of the different stamps. So take note, what I'm using are non-destructive analytical techniques. Okay, so yung mga stamps are in safe hands. So I'm not destroying them, I'm not grinding them, I'm not putting any chemicals, okay? So those are what we call non-destructive techniques. So later on, I'll be showing you what those equipments are. And then basically what I will be doing is I have the stamp sample, and first I need to validate or more or less have a certain idea what year it was manufactured. So I think that website, philippines-stamps.net, is a very, very good website, and it's rather accurate. Like I said, I tried comparing it with my modern day stamps, and accurate naman siya. So I think that would be a good resource also about the year when the stamps were manufactured. And then after validating the year, that's where I will use the non-destructive analytical techniques. Diba? Kanina I've mentioned the X-ray and then the infrared. Okay? And then from there, you just interpret the results. Okay? So it's relatively very straightforward and very easy. But obviously, the interpretation part of the results, you need a chemist for that because it can rather be a little bit complicated. Okay? So depending on the skill set. And if you're going to take a look at this at the lower portion, infrared. I'm sure you have heard of the infrared radiation already, di ba? Are you familiar with the infrared? In terms of heat. Okay? So if you're going to take a look at this, this is what we call the visible light. This one, visible light, would be the normal light that we are seeing right now. That is what you call your visible light. And then if you go a little bit on the left, that is where the infrared would come in. If you go to the right, that is the ultraviolet, and then you also have the X-ray. Okay? So ultraviolet, familiar kayo dyan, that would be the rays coming from the sun. Okay? And then infrared, usually yung mga heat. Kunyari, init ng katawan, init pag nagluto, the heat effect, that is in the form of what we call infrared radiation. Okay? And then at the same time, sa mga remote controls nyo, yung parang pula dun sa gitna, those are in the form of infrared radiation as well. Okay? So basically, what it does is that machine would use that infrared radiation to determine the chemical composition, just to put it simply. And another thing, di ba, I've mentioned about the X-ray, so I'm sure you're very much familiar with the X-ray already, di ba, yung X-ray machine. Di ba? Pag nabalian tayo, X-ray, you would be able to see the inner parts of your body. So that machine would actually use X-rays to determine the chemical composition. Okay? So may mga machines tayo na ganyan sa chemistry. So ano to, if you're going to ask a scientist or a chemist, these are technically normal instruments that we deal almost every day. Okay? So they might be something new to you. So anyway, just to show you the first machine, what we call an FTIR. So we call it as an FTIR, and then the attenuated total reflectance. Okay. So anyway, you don't need to concern yourself about that, but we call it an FTIR ATR. So that is how the FTIR would look like. Okay. And then that machine will give out infrared radiation. Okay. So obviously everything is closed. So you're doing the reaction inside. So it cannot be open. Because if it's open, it's going to interfere with the visible normal light. So it has to be enclosed in a particular container. So siguro more or less it would be as big as this. Okay, so it's a rather very big machine, and then medyo mataas, ganyan. Okay, so you put in the sample inside that one, and then the key why this would be considered as a non-destructive technique is ito, yung tinatawag na ATR. So ito yung parang pinaka-key natin. So if you're going to take a look at this, the stamp will be placed on this part over here. Okay, remember this part over here is flat. Okay, so you put this ATR inside the FTIR. So this is flat, and then you have this certain holder from top. Ang gagawin mo, ibababa mo lang yung holder and iipitin niya lang yung stamp doon sa gitna. Okay? And then, paparan ko lang yung machine, infrared radiation would hit a certain crystal in the middle, and then tatamaan niya yung stamp. Okay? And then the concentration, the identity of that particular stamp magre-register na sa computer. Okay? Mabilis lang. So siguro, running one stamp would only take me 1 minute. So that would be equivalent to 45 scans. So parang you could just imagine 45 na ganun siya within 1 minute. So medyo mabilis lang siya. And then again, these are non-destructive techniques, because if you're going to put it here, maglalak naman siya kapag nakaipit na siya. So hindi siya matatanggal. Okay? So that is what you call your FTIR. So I guess this would be a simple way of imagining how the FTIR would works. Okay? So basic chemistry. Anyway, I'm a chemist. So remember, you have these molecules. So what happens is that when you hit the molecules with an infrared radiation, what will happen is they would start moving like this. Okay? So instead of them moving normally, once you hit them with an IR, they would either stretch or parang scissor, parang ganyan, pabubuka-buka ka, and so on. And pwede naman din siguro silang mag-bend a little bit. Okay? So when that happens, that energy is being registered by a computer. Okay? So depending on the chemical components, depending on the vibration of your molecule. Okay, so this would be another non-destructive technique. We call it EDXRF. Okay, so this time it uses X-rays. So kanina yung machine gumagamit ng infrared, ito gumagamit ng X-rays. Okay, so take note, the machine is rather siguro more or less the same size as that of the FTIR, pero a little bit bulkier, because ang lining nitong XRF meron siyang lead. Okay? Bakit meron lead? Simply because of the X-rays. So X-rays are very, very dangerous. So it has to be covered with lead in order for the X-rays not to come in. Okay? Pero anyway, if you open this XRF, you would have this small glass-like window in the middle. Ang gagawin mo lang, kunin mo lang yung stamps, ilagay mo lang siya doon sa gitna, tapos i-secure mo lang, isarado mo, and then X-rays, tatamaan na siya ng X-rays. Okay? Usually, one scanning would take about 8 minutes. So, medyo matagal. Okay? Because it's scanning on all sides. Okay? Pero again, take note, all of them are non-destructive techniques. Okay? So anyway, that would be the XRF. Ayan. And then, this is one thing nice about these techniques is you can actually zero in on a particular point that you want. Okay? So as an example, I would like to take a look at the more or less concentrated red light pigment on this side. I can set the XRF na mag-zoom in lang doon sa point na yon. Okay? Another example, di ba, I've mentioned etong parang yellow gold na color dito. I can zero in on that particular color. Okay? And same thing with this one. Because I find yung sleeves ni Lapu-Lapu medyo dark yung color ng red. So I can actually use the XRF to zoom in on that particular point. Okay? So basically what I did is on one particular point, both the IR and the X-ray, doon lang siya tumama para at least I could make a certain correlation about it. Okay? So yan, may mga high-tech equipment naman tayo dito sa Pilipinas. Kayang-kaya nating gawin yan, yung mga ganyang klaseng research. Okay, so I'm going to show you some of the preliminary early results that we have for this project. And this is an example of a type of data that you can get from an infrared. Okay, so I'm not really expecting you to understand them, pero just to put it simply, di ba kanina may pinakita ko yung parang range ng colors, di ba? Visible, infrared, X-ray. So ito yung kanyang range na pwedeng makita. So that would be around from 600 until about 4,000. So parang yun lang yung window ng FTIR na pwede niyang makita. Okay? And then if you're going to take a look at this would only tell us kung gaano kadaming particles or gaano kadaming molecules ang nag-absorb at that particular wavelength. Okay? Obviously, if there are a lot of particles absorbing at that particular wavelength, it's going to be very broad. Kung less particles, that would be very thin. And so on. Okay? So basically, ang ginagawa namin, tinitingnan lang namin yung mga dip na ganyan. Kung saan yung madami, saan yung mas malaki, saan yung sharp, and so on. Okay? Pero if you're going to take a look at this, well, this confirms that your stamps is made up of paper. Obviously. Okay? Pero we're trying to come up with a scientific basis of that. So it's actually made up of cellulose. So cellulose, that would be one of the chemical compositions of your paper. Okay, so if you're going to take a look at the graph here at the bottom, so this would be your cellulose, this would be your natural cellulose, and then this would be an FTIR of one of the samples. So more or less, compare mo lang yon at saka itong part na to, tapos in terms of percentage, more or less, all of the stamps that I tested are actually made up of paper. So yun naman ang common sa kanila. So all of them are made up of cellulose. Okay? Usually kasi when you say cellulose, you have the OH, oxygen hydrogen group. And usually oxygen hydrogen group would be very strong on this part of the FTIR. Okay? So anyway, it takes a lot of practice to interpret those different types of spectra. We call it spectra. So anyway, so these are some of the results that we obtained from the 1940 stamps. So nilamsam ko na lang. Basically, ang adhesive nila is in the form of gum arabic and in the form of starch. Okay? Which is, I don't know, ang difference lang nung starch at saka ng gum arabic would only be about 1 year. I think this would be 1947 and then the other one would be 1948 or 1949. So you actually have a difference on the adhesive that they put in on the back. Okay, so the FTIR can actually monitor that. So you have your gum arabic coming from a tree, from an acacia tree as an example. So you can use that as an adhesive, and then you can also use starch, ordinary starch as an adhesive. Okay, so I actually got it from those particular stamps. And then at the same time, I used the EDX to zero in on the red color, to the green color. So yung mga green-like color niya. So these are some of the chemicals that I was able to get. Surprisingly, iron oxide, I think it has something to do with the contaminants on the presser when they made the paper. Like say, obviously they would use metal, metal templates for that. So that would probably one of the contaminants. And then calcium carbonate, those are usually compounds that you can normally get from a soil or a clay origin. Okay, so probably I would expect that the binder would be something like a clay-like material for the pigments. And then what is this telling us? It's telling us that the pigment is more or less an inorganic compound. Okay? Anong ibig sabihin ng inorganic compound? Those are synthetic colorings. So I think it made sense because in the 1940s, 1950s, those are the American period. So more or less we have access on the inorganic compounds or inorganic dyes during that time. Okay? So I read the paper, I think in the latter part of the 1800s to about early 1900s, they would use organic compounds. Organic compounds meaning you get it from a plant origin. Pero eto, synthetic na siya. They're actually using inorganic compounds for that. In chemistry, when you say inorganic, those are containing metals. So anyway, these would be the 1950s. So you will notice that you also have the adhesive na gum arabic. So I don't know, I couldn't come up with that certain trend because you have another 1950s stamp for that blue na ang adhesive niya ay starch naman. So anyway, I still have to think about it, pero you could see that there are variations on the type of adhesive that they're using. And then if you're going to take a look at this, yung kay Jose Rizal stamp, you have the coaline. Coaline, these are clay minerals. Okay, so again, I would expect that they would use clay-like materials for the binder on the paint. Okay, and then that looks familiar. Yung ultramarine blue, those are synthetic compounds. Those are common industrial synthetic compounds. So you will notice that's in the 1950s. So, well, we don't know whether they are imported or whether the Philippines are actually manufacturing it. So we don't know. Pero at least ang maganda, we have this certain idea how it was made. Okay? And then those are some what we call inorganic compounds. And some of them are actually contaminants. And then this would be another example. So again, calcium carbonate, silicate, so clay-like material. You also have that synthetic ultramarine kind of pigment. And then you also have the gum arabic as an adhesive at the back. So medyo popular ang gum arabic. So yan. And then this one, adhesive niya, gum arabic. And then surprisingly, mas maraming inorganic compounds yung mas matingkad yung kulay. Okay, may zinc, may iron, may magnesium sulfate, and so on. So that would be representing that golden yellow-like color on the stamp. Okay, pero I still have yet to think about what specific mineral is that. Pero parang I've noticed that the more striking the color is, the more inorganic compounds that you have, the more minerals that you have. So anyway, that would be an example of that. And then at the same time, I tried to test a 1990s stamp. So I think that would be a 1992 stamp commemorating Corregidor. Okay, mapapansin natin na nagbago yung kanyang adhesive. Okay, polyvinyl alcohol. So parang related siya dun sa mga Elmer's glue natin type of material. Okay, so from an original na medyo organic, well, all of them are organic. But anyway, in terms of, let's say, using starch or gum arabic, medyo nagiging synthetic na siya, yung parang Elmer's glue type of material as an adhesive. So basically, what I would wanted is to try to expand the baseline data for the chemical composition. So anyway, this is a result of the XRF. So I did a tabulation of the different elements of the XRF. So remember, if the FTIR can take a look at the compounds, diba? If you recall your high school chemistry, diba? Compounds would be a lot of elements connected together. XRF would be able to see the exact elemental composition. May calcium ba siya? May magnesium, and so on. Okay? So if you're going to take a look at this, well, anyway, you don't need to mind about the numbers. Pero more or less, the 1940s and 1950s stamps, it contains a lot of aluminum, silicon, at saka calcium, and then sulfur. Okay? So usually these are elements that you can normally find on your synthetic inorganic compounds. And then the calcium and silicon will tell us that it's more of clay-like, something like origin. And which is, I find this very surprising because if you're going to take a look at this column, you have the presence of lead. Okay? So as you all know, lead is a very, very, very dangerous element. Okay? Delikado yon. Pero anyway, medyo tolerable level naman. Okay? Pero you could just imagine during the time, dinidilaan pa natin yung ating stamps, di ba? Pero it would contain lead. Delikado, nakakatakot ang lead. Dahil kasi it can affect your nerves. So it's actually a very dangerous element. So anyway, surprisingly, you have the presence of lead in all the stamps that I tested. Okay? So question, saan galing yung lead? It's probably during the manufacturing process, pang-dissolve ng mga substance or part of the inorganic compounds as well. Okay? And then, surprisingly, nung tinest ko yung modern day na stamp, as an example, for this one, wala siyang lead. Walang lead. Remember, these are the 1990s already. So I would expect the newer stamps, definitely wala na siyang lead. Okay? So makikita mo yung progression kung paano tayo natututo. Di ba? Parang before, we're actually using a certain manufacturing technique that would involve harmful chemicals, pero right now, medyo aware na tayo sa mga ganong klaseng bagay. So it's really very nice for us to take a look at those kind of things. So anyway, as a conclusion or further goals of this research, there are actually differences between the chemical composition of the different postage stamps made in the 1940s and 1950s. So what I wanted eventually is try to extend this to about 1960s, probably to about 1980s. Okay? This is interesting dahil kasi during that time, I would expect na wala pang certain type of standards in making your ink, pero right now we have a lot of standards already. Okay, so it would be very much interesting to study those very old stamps. And then what I would want to come up with a baseline data of chemical composition of postage stamps. Like I said, based on that chemical composition, you would be able to know the progression of how stamps are manufactured here in the Philippines. And then I posed a question a while ago whether they are imported or locally made ba. So we can take a look at that. And then definitely this would have a certain extension on paper conservation. So remember, paper and stamps are both made up of cellulose. Okay? And in order for you to preserve your paper well, you have to know the chemical composition of your paper. Okay? Dahil kasi, di ba, mahirap mag-preserve kung hindi mo alam kung anong pinipreserve mo. Di ba? And then that's where the science or that's where the chemistry would come in. So it's actually works hand in hand with the with the arts as well. Okay, so these are just some acknowledgements. So the chemistry department of De La Salle University, and then I would like to acknowledge the SHIMADZU Philippines. They have been very, very generous in lending us the equipment, the XRF and the FTIR. So they lent the equipment for us with us for 1 week. So nag-run ako ng mga stamps. So yun. If you have any questions, further clarifications, feel free to drop by at the chemistry department. It's in the William Hall 5th floor. I'm sure you're very much familiar with that. So that would be the local line and then my email address. Thank you very much.
Seven. Thank you, Mr. Kaime, for that very wonderful presentation. Once again, a round of applause, please.
Salamat.
It also happened to me at some point in college. I worked at a university library and I was assigned at the periodical section. It was the serials department. I collected the stamps and they were old. They were old ones. Wow. But I lost them when I already became a librarian. We transferred home and I lost those things. But I was really engrossed with the presentation.
Thank you.
So are there any questions from the crowd this time?
Questions, please. Yes, ma'am. Actually, mix. Mix na siya all these years. So some of them I removed directly from the envelope. Some of them I bought it. Some of them pamana na lang. So halo-halo na siya. Hindi pa. Hindi pa. Dahil kasi what I wanted for this research is I wanted to make it local. Dahil kasi I have, well, konti lang naman yung scientific publications. Meron one from the US, another from Brazil, another from Italy, and so on. Pero Philippine postage stamps, walang gumagawa. So I would like to come up with this baseline data of that chemical analysis.
Okay. More questions from the audience?
Questions, please. Or kung may question kayo sa chemistry, you can ask me. Yes. Okay. Well, yes and no. The FTIR, because remember, it's like a lot of molecules all absorbing at the same time. So that's why if you're going to take a look at this graph, it's not very sharp. So it's like you have something like a lot of molecules absorbing at that particular wavelength. Pero ito lang yung pinakamarami. So this would be the more concentrated ones. So it would give you an idea about the more or less the chemical composition of your substance. And then the FTIR is very useful for organic compounds. Okay, so we usually use the FTIR for organic compounds. When you say organic compounds, those are the compounds that contains the carbon, the letter C. So it's a very, very effective material for that. Inorganic, yes, a little bit, but it's very much efficient in detecting organic compounds.
That's cool to hear.
Thank you.
Isn't it that cool to hear? It is.
Yes, ma'am. Apo. Actually, meron naman pong, may value naman po siya depending on the, well, based no sa mga nabasa ko, usually yung mga unique stamps, yun ang mas mataas yung value. Or let's say nagkaroon ka ng error. Let's say error in the printing of your stamp. So that would really fetch a very, very high value. Usually. May error. Dahil kasi meron ako nabasa sa US, yung parang eroplano, imbis na ganito siya, nabaliktad yung eroplano. So parang I think it's sold for, I don't know, millions. Para rin sa pera. So ganun lang, nagkamali ng printing. Or minsan, meron yung isang printing na nag-slide ng konti yung color. So as an example, di ba, let's say you have this stamp. Okay, para kunyari, ito yung yellow gold, nag-slide a little bit off doon sa kanyang border, usually it would fetch a very, very high value. So yung ganun usually. Okay, yung mga errors, yun yung mga okay, mas unique yun, mas mahal. But then again, ako kasi I'm coming from a perspective of, I'm more interested with what's inside. Dahil kasi, kumbaga parang it would tell something about our culture as well eh. Diba? Kaya ba natin mag-manufacture during that time? Or sunod-sunuran lang ba tayo sa ibang bansa kung ano ilalagay nila sa atin? So parang ganun lang. Yes, sir. Difference. Okay. Well, actually, I haven't done studies on it yet. Pero I would presume probably yung stamps natin, modern day stamps would be more stable. I would expect that it's going to be more stable. Pero I would believe yung mga old stamps, probably they're very, very sensitive to, let's say, heat, in terms of heat, or in terms of, kunyari, pag mabasa, mababad, and so on. So definitely may changes siya. Dahil kasi remember, heat can also affect your pigmentations. That's possible, sir.
Okay, we'll be entertaining 2 more questions from the participants this time.
Questions?
Or any reaction. Violent reactions are also welcomed here in this.
Yes. Or even chemistry questions. Very much welcome.
Yes. Or chemical reaction.
Chemical reactions, yes. Or balancing of equations. I can answer that.
Let's skip that, sir.
So interesting, no? That kasi I find it fascinating. That kasi you can actually use science. You can use science for that. Dahil kasi I've been doing a lot of talks and then parang minsan the audience mamamangha na, uy, pwede palang gawin yan. So, nagagawa ng chemist yan. We're actually doing a lot of research. Chemists are doing a lot of things. They're actually doing a lot of research as well.
Okay, Okay, questions?
Wala na pong tanong.
So, kung wala na, then again, let's give a round of applause to our speaker.
Thank you.
So at this point, we'll be awarding a certificate of appreciation. May I call in our archivist, Ms. Rosel Maestro. Please allow me to read the citation of the certificate. De La Salle University Libraries presents this certificate of appreciation to Mr. John Michael C. Caime in grateful recognition, and sincere appreciation for sharing his invaluable time, knowledge, and expertise as resource speaker during the training workshop entitled ARA the Archivist Do It Yourself Practical Paper Conservation Techniques. Given this 10th day of July 2018 at the multipurpose room, the Learning Commons, 12th floor, Henry C. Senior Hall, DLSU. Signed, Ms. Rosel S. Maestro, Chair, Archives at 50 Committee, and signed, Ms. Christine M. Abrigo, Director of Libraries. Congratulations and thank you, sir. And also, we would like to we would like to call in the students of Mr. Kami to be here in front for a photo documentation. They're here for full pledge report.
May attendance pala. Oo nga.
And also, we already gave out copies of the evaluation form. So those will be exchanged for a certificate later. So the workshop participants are requested to